A black businessman disguises himself as a homeless person in his own restaurant. But the employee's attitude shocks everyone. What if you discovered that someone you deeply respect is hiding a shocking truth behind the appearance of a homeless person? This is the reality that Marcus Johnson, a successful black businessman, decides to confront by disguising himself as a homeless man in his own restaurant. Observing how his employees and customers treat those living on the streets, he feels compelled to confront the prejudice and indifference that permeate his world. At 45 years old, Marcus Johnson is a testament to overcoming adversity. He grew up in a humble neighborhood and through hard work and determination, built a network of fine dining restaurants in the United States. Despite his success, something weighs on him: the cruel way his employees and customers treat homeless individuals who AP. For him, this indifference reflects a larger problem in society, one he cannot ignore. After witnessing repeated episodes of disrespect, Marcus decides to conduct a social experiment. He disguises himself as a beggar and enters his restaurant in New York, ready to witness what happens when no one knows who he really is. As he steps into the luxurious space, he is met with a hostile reception marked by disdain and neglect. The manager, Emily, proud of upholding the restaurant's standards, treats him with contempt, while the young and ambitious waiter, Alex, feels pressured to escort him out to preserve the venue's image. Although the environment is imposing, Marcus's true battle unfolds behind the curtains of sophistication. He observes the loyalty of Vanessa, a regular customer who admires his journey, but also finds himself confronted with his own prejudices. Meanwhile, Sarah, the head chef, is the only one who treats him with dignity, representing a light amid the darkness of indifference. The tension escalates as Marcus realizes the depth of the prejudice that permeates not only the restaurant, but also his personal life. The revelation of his true identity triggers devastating reactions. Alex loses a potential promotion, Emily faces the consequences of her narrow-mindedness, and Vanessa, shocked, reflects on her own biases. On the other hand, Sarah is recognized for her empathy, proving that true greatness lies in humanity. This experience transforms the perspectives of Marcus and everyone around him. He realizes that change must begin within his own company and decides to implement reforms that promote inclusion and empathy. Through this journey, he not only challenges the status quo, but also becomes an advocate for social change, fighting against the exclusion and prejudice that plague society. Marcus's story serves as a powerful reminder that behind every face lies a story that deserves to be heard, and that true wealth is not merely in material success, but in the ability to see and value humanity in all. Still in his disguise as a beggar, Marcus felt the weight of people's gazes as he tried to settle into a corner of the restaurant. The environment, once his domain, now felt hostile and oppressive. He noticed how customers averted their eyes, as if his presence were a stain on the establishment's elegance. Waiter Alex, in his immaculate uniform and determined expression, approached him with a look that mixed disdain and impatience. He said he couldn't stay there, his voice firm yet tinged with nervousness. It was clear he felt pressured to maintain the restaurant's image. Marcus felt a pang of disappointment. This young man whom he had hired for his potential now appeared so influenced. He says, Alex's indifference hurt him more than he expected. In his mind, he wondered if ambition had blinded him to the true essence of people. Meanwhile, manager Emily watched the scene from a distance, her expression one of disgust. To her, Marcus's presence was a threat to the restaurant's reputation. She had always prided herself on maintaining high standards, and any deviation from that was unacceptable. Marcus knew that behind her controlling facade lay insecurities that drove her to act so rigidly. He recalled his own struggles in building his empire, but also recognized that true strength comes from empathy. The tension grew when Vanessa, a regular customer who admired Marcus, entered the restaurant. Noticing the strange atmosphere, she approached him with a smile and asked if he was okay, unaware of his disguise. The connection she felt was genuine, but in his new reality, Marcus hesitated. He grappled with whether to reveal his true identity or maintain the facade. The thought that people might treat him differently based on their perceptions began to torment his mind. Chef Sarah, who was in the kitchen, noticed the interaction and decided to step out to see what was happening. Upon seeing him, she sensed something different about him, something that challenged her worldview. Unlike Alex and Emily, Sarah had never been swayed by appearances. She always believed that every person had value, regardless of their situation. As she approached, she asked if he needed anything, offering to bring him a warm soup. Marcus was taken aback. Her kindness felt like a breath of fresh air amidst the hostile environment. He accepted the offer, feeling a knot loosen in his chest. However, Sarah's presence also made him reflect on his own beliefs. He wondered if, throughout his journey, he had become one of those people who viewed others merely as numbers on a financial statement. The idea troubled him, making him question whether success had distanced him from empathy. As the hours went by, the obstacles became more complex. Marcus found himself dealing with hostile reactions, not only from the staff, but also from some customers who didn't hesitate to make derogatory comments. He heard laughter and whispers, and the emotional impact was overwhelming. Each word thrown like a stone, each glance like a blade. What had started as an experiment to understand the dynamics of power and respect was now becoming an internal battle. He struggled against the pain of rejection and the frustration of seeing his own people succumbing to such deep-rooted prejudices. With each new day in this disguise, Marcus felt his inner strength being tested. He began to reflect on his past, on the challenges he had faced to get to where he was. The feeling of powerlessness was new to him. A man who had always had control over his life now found himself at the mercy of others' gazes. What he had learned about resilience and overcoming challenges seemed distant, as he wondered if he would be able to make a difference. The difficulties that arose were not only external, but internal as well. Marcus began to realize he needed to change the narrative he was telling himself. He could not let others' disdain define who he was, and more importantly, he needed to remember what truly mattered, the humanity that exists in each of us, regardless of our circumstances. Sarah's empathy became a beacon in the darkness, and the friendship that was beginning to form between them became a challenge in itself. As Marcus opened up to her, he also feared what might happen when the truth came to light. The connection they were forming could be destroyed if she discovered who he really was. But at the same time, he felt he needed someone who understood him, someone who saw him beyond his achievements. Marcus's journey was just beginning, and he realized that each challenge he faced was not just a stone in his path, but an opportunity for learning and growth. He knew that, in the end, true transformation would not come solely from his fight against external prejudice, but from his ability to reconnect with his own humanity and that of those around him. Marcus observed the frantic movement of the restaurant, feeling like an intruder in a world that had once been his. The soup Sarah brought him was warm and comforting, but even as he savored it, anxiety built up inside him. Each bite seemed to bring forth his inner struggle, while the gazes of other customers silently judged him. He wondered if he would be able to endure another day in that hostile environment. Sarah's presence was a relief, but also a source of concern. He noticed how she worked hard to maintain harmony in the kitchen, ignoring the malicious comments from some customers. When she stepped away, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if one day she would discover who he truly was and how that would affect her. The thought of losing that genuine connection consumed him. It was a dilemma. The truth could set him free, but it could also destroy the little he had built amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, Alex, the waiter, seemed increasingly determined to expel him. Each day, he became more aggressive in his attempts to maintain order in the restaurant. One day, after hearing a derogatory comment from a customer, Alex approached Marcus with a look of contempt. "You don't realize that you're only here to embarrass us all? You should be ashamed to show yourself like this," he said, with a coldness that made Marcus's heart race. The pain in Alex's words was profound. Marcus felt that each insult was not only directed at him, but also at everyone in vulnerable situations. He wanted to scream, wanted to defend himself, but the truth held him captive. Instead, he chose to remain silent, swallowing the bitterness rising in his throat. Anger mixed with sadness, creating a whirlwind of emotions that left him exhausted. The situation became even more complicated when a group of customers entered the restaurant, laughing and talking loudly. Marcus recognized one of them, a former business associate, a man who had been part of his business journey. The impact was like a punch to the stomach. The fear of being recognized grew, and he shrank back into his corner, wishing to disappear. His eyes met those of his former colleague, but Marcus quickly looked away, trying to hide in the shadows. The man, seemingly oblivious to his presence, began to comment on the identity crisis that some people faced, laughter echoing around the table. Marcus's heart sank further. In that moment, the reality of his situation crystallized. He was trapped between two worlds. On one side, the life he had built, marked by success and power. On the other, the truth of who he was now, invisible and despised. The internal struggle intensified, and he realized he needed to confront his own limits. What did he really desire? What did that mean for him? The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. His friendship with Sarah deepened, but guilt also grew. Each shared laugh, each meaningful conversation became a reminder of what he was hiding. He wanted to be honest with her, but the fear of what that could mean paralyzed him. The pressure mounted, and he felt as if he was about to explode. Moreover, his relationship with Alex became increasingly tense. The young waiter whom he once admired was now becoming a symbol of the prejudice Marcus was trying to understand. One day, after a heated discussion between Alex and another employee about Marcus's presence, he decided to take action. In a moment of desperation, Marcus stood up and challenged Alex, asking why he felt the need to dehumanize him and what he gained from it. Alex's reaction was instantaneous. He was surprised but quickly regained his composure, responding with even deeper contempt. He said that this was a restaurant, not a shelter, and if Marcus couldn't behave like a human being, he didn't belong there. Alex's words cut like a knife. Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, but something within him was also awakened. The struggle was not just against the disdain of others, but also against his own hesitation to assert himself. He realized he needed to stand up not only for himself, but for everyone who, like him, was treated as invisible. With each new day, Marcus fought to pick himself back up. His friendship with Sarah became a safe harbor amidst the emotional storm. He learned from her the importance of seeing people beyond appearances. However, the weight of the secret he carried threatened to crumble everything he had achieved. He knew that to grow he needed to face his truth, but the doubt about how and when to do so consumed him. Marcus's journey was far from easy. Every step forward was accompanied by 2 steps back. Yet even amid despair, he began to glimpse the possibility of a new beginning. He understood that true overcoming was not just about facing the outside world, but also about embracing vulnerability and the strength that comes from within. Marcus was in a moment of deep reflection when an unexpected event changed everything in his life. It was an ordinary afternoon at the restaurant, and the usual hustle and bustle surrounded the environment. Sarah, as always, was busy in the kitchen, but Marcus felt that something was about to happen. He was observing the customers, trying to lose himself in their conversations, when he saw a figure that left him paralyzed. It was a woman, an old friend from his previous life whom he hadn't seen in years. She entered the restaurant with a broad smile, radiating confidence and happiness. Marcus felt his heart race. He didn't know how to react. Memories of the days when they were inseparable flooded back, but it also brought forth the pain of his past. He hid in his corner, hoping she wouldn't recognize him, but his fear became a reality when the woman turned, and their eyes met. "Marcus," she exclaimed, the joy in her voice contrasting with the anxiety growing inside him. He forced a smile, but the feeling of being an imposter consumed him. How could he face someone who knew his life of success and now saw him as just a shadow of what he once was? The woman approached, her gaze curious and concerned. "What happened to you? It's been so long. I didn't know you were here." The sincerity in her tone made Marcus's chest tighten. He wanted to explain, to tell her everything, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, he shook his head, murmuring something inaudible. As they talked, the woman began sharing stories about her life, her achievements and challenges. She spoke about her work, her travels, and the people she had met. Each word sounded like a reminder of what Marcus had lost. The feeling of failure enveloped him like a heavy blanket, suffocating his ability to rejoice in her happiness. The conversation soon drew the attention of other customers, and Alex, who was nearby, seized the opportunity. He approached the table, his gaze filled with contempt. "You shouldn't be here," he said, intending to humiliate. "Go back to your cave." Marcus felt anger rising, but the woman's look stopped him. She stared at Alex, surprise mingling with indignation. "This isn't a place to treat people like that," she said, her voice firm. "Everyone has the right to be here, no matter where they come from." Her defense touched him in a way he didn't expect. What was happening? He felt seen, as if for a moment his struggle had been recognized, but the shame and pain inside were intense. How could someone like him, so broken, deserve a moment of defense? He wanted to thank her, but he felt the words would get stuck in his throat. After that interaction, the woman said goodbye, but her impact on Marcus's life was profound. He realized that how others saw him did not define who he was. The internal struggle that had always been present began to transform. The revelation that there were still people who cared, who saw beyond appearances, challenged his perception of worth and success. The conversation with his friend forced him to confront his past failures. He had allowed fear to dominate him. He had hidden behind a mask that no longer represented him. He felt the urgency to change, to not let shame consume him. From that moment on, he decided he needed to be honest with himself and with Sarah. The decision to reveal himself to her was no longer just a burden. It was now a possibility of liberation. He remembered every laugh they shared and every moment he felt welcomed. That connection was real, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could understand his journey. In the following days, Marcus's perspective began to change. Instead of shrinking in his pain, he began to rise. He realized that true strength came from accepting his vulnerability. He no longer needed to hide. His friendship with Sarah became a beacon, illuminating the path to his truth. The struggle was not resolved, but the revelation that there were still people willing to see him as he truly was gave him hope. He was ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, ready to rise again and finally embrace the life he chose to live. Every step he took toward authenticity was a victory, and the idea of accepting himself as a whole, with his flaws and his triumphs, began to solidify within him. He was about to enter a new chapter, and this time he was determined not to be defined by what others thought. Marcus's true journey was just beginning. His life began to transform after the unexpected encounter with his old friend. He realized that even though he was surrounded by challenges, there was a spark of hope that motivated him to move forward. The conversation with her made him reflect on his own life and choices. From that moment on, he decided he needed to be more authentic, not just with others, but with himself. In the days that followed, Marcus tried to open up more to Sarah. He began to share small parts of his life, his insecurities and the fears that accompanied him. However, this journey was not easy. With each step he took toward honesty, new difficulties arose. He noticed that when he spoke about his weaknesses, insecurity consumed him. The pain of being vulnerable left him exposed, and the fear of being rejected by Sarah made him hesitate. One night, while they were at a restaurant, he decided it was time to be completely honest. Marcus looked into Sarah's eyes and with a trembling voice began to tell his story. He spoke about the difficult years, the loss of his identity, and how he had hidden behind a facade. Each word felt like a weight lifted off his shoulders, but he also sensed the tension in the air. Sarah listened attentively, and the expression on her face was a mix of concern and empathy. "Marcus, I didn't know you were going through all this," she said softly. "You don't have to carry this alone." Her response was a relief, but it also brought forth a new challenge. Their friendship could strengthen, but what if Sarah couldn't handle the emotional burden he was bringing? Doubt settled in his mind. He didn't want to be a burden, and this concern began to affect his interactions with her. He started to feel anxious, always waiting for her to pull away, to look at him with disappointment. During this time, Marcus began to dedicate himself to activities that helped him deal with his emotions. He started writing in a journal, putting his anguish and reflections on paper. Writing became a form of therapy, allowing him to process what he felt. However, there were days when the pain was so intense that he found himself trapped in a cycle of self-criticism. He wondered if he would really be able to overcome it all, or if he was doomed to always be the failure he believed himself to be. One morning, while reviewing his notes, Marcus received a text message from Sarah. She invited him for a walk in the park. The idea of being outdoors, away from the hustle and bustle of the restaurant, felt comforting. However, when he met her, anxiety returned. He was nervous, worried about what he might say or how he might behave. As they walked, Sarah began to talk about her own challenges. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm not living up to what others expect of me," she confessed. Marcus was surprised. He had always seen her as someone strong and confident, but now he was seeing a side of her he had never noticed before. This revelation made him realize that everyone has their struggles. Over time, he began to understand that being vulnerable didn't mean being weak. By sharing his experiences, he was creating space for Sarah to express herself as well. This exchange strengthened their friendship, but there was still an obstacle. Marcus's insecurity persisted, and he found himself battling the inner voice that told him to protect himself and not expose himself further. Weeks passed, and Marcus began to create a new cycle in his life. He enrolled in a support group where he could talk to others facing similar difficulties. This step was a challenge, but he felt he needed a safe space to open up. By meeting new people, he realized he was not alone. Others were also struggling and seeking the same authenticity. Despite the progress, the shadows of the past continued to haunt him. Sometimes he felt overwhelmed by the pressure to be enough. Comparison with others became a new challenge, and he found himself fighting not to be swept away by this negative spiral. With every step, there was a sense that a setback could happen at any moment. But deep down, Marcus knew he was moving in the right direction. He began to feel stronger, more capable of facing the obstacles that arose. And although the journey was filled with ups and downs, the certainty that he was rediscovering himself and reconnecting with meaningful people in his life gave him hope. He was no longer alone in this struggle. He had the chance to rewrite his story, and that was all that truly mattered. Marcus was at a crucial point in his life. After so many challenges and moments of loneliness, he finally began to open up to a new reality. The encounter with Sarah had been a turning point, a light that illuminated the dark corners of his mind and heart. He realized that behind the fear and insecurity was a strength that propelled him to seek authenticity. In the days that followed, Marcus decided he no longer wanted to live in the shadow of his insecurities. He began to trust himself more, a journey that was not easy, but worth it. By sharing his weaknesses with Sarah, he noticed that instead of feeling like a burden, he was allowing her to come closer and connect in a deeper way. It was as if the vulnerability he had feared so much became a bond that strengthened their friendship. With each conversation, Marcus felt lighter. He learned that trust was built on honesty, and that opening up didn't mean weakness, but rather courage. This new perspective helped him face his fears. He started to understand that everyone has their battles and that he wasn't alone in this struggle. Through shared stories, their conversations became a space for mutual growth. One day, after a meeting at the support group, Marcus decided it was time to take another step in his transformation. He remembered how he had always dreamed of writing, but had sidelined that desire because he felt undesirable and incapable. Motivated by the support he received, he enrolled in a creative writing course. This new challenge made him feel alive again. Writing became a form of expression, a way to transform his pain into something beautiful. As he practiced his writing, Marcus began to see life with new eyes. He realized that success wasn't just about achieving material goals, but also about finding inner peace and reconnecting with his true essence. This new understanding reflected in his daily routine. He started to value small daily achievements, like writing a paragraph that moved him or having a meaningful conversation with Sarah. However, not everything was smooth sailing. The shadow of the past still followed him, and there were days when self-criticism consumed him. Comparing himself to others remained a challenge. He caught himself wondering whether he was truly making progress or merely deceiving himself. But instead of succumbing to these negative thoughts, Marcus began to apply the L. He remembered that each step, even the smallest ones, was part of his growth journey. His friendship with Sarah deepened even further. They began to support one another, sharing their victories and challenges. In a special moment while walking in the park, Sarah looked at Marcus and said that the strength he found was inspiring. He had taught her that we all have our struggles and that it is important to be honest about them. These words touched Marcus deeply. He realized that by opening up, he had not only allowed himself to be more authentic, but had also helped Sarah feel comfortable sharing her own insecurities. Their friendship had become a safe haven where they could both grow and learn together. Over time, Marcus began to feel more confident in his decisions. He was no longer afraid of failure, as he understood that failures were opportunities for learning. This new mindset helped him face obstacles with courage. He saw himself as a writer in constant evolution, shaping his story each day. Marcus's transformation was evident. He was no longer the man hiding behind a facade. He had learned to embrace his vulnerability, to trust himself, and to value the connections he cultivated. Life still presented challenges, but now he faced them with a new perspective, knowing that true wealth lay in the relationships he built and the lessons he learned along the way. And so Marcus understood that the journey had no end. It was a continuous cycle of learning and growth. He was ready to face whatever came his way, confident that life was a story he could write himself, filled with triumphs, unexpected friendships, and moments of wisdom. With each step, he was becoming not only a stronger man, but also a truer friend, capable of inspiring others on their own journeys of transformation. Marcus was at a decisive moment in his journey. For weeks, he had dedicated himself to writing, exploring his emotions, and transforming his experiences into words. However, a new challenge was approaching, the day of the final presentation for the creative writing course. He was to read a passage from his work to the class, and the thought of exposing his vulnerabilities in front of a group of strangers paralyzed him with fear. The night before the presentation, as he reviewed his text, anxiety took over his body. He remembered the times he hesitated to share his feelings, the criticism he always feared receiving, and the weight of expectations he felt on his shoulders. Insecurity whispered in his mind, telling him he wasn't good enough, that his words weren't worthy of being heard. Feeling suffocated, he decided to go for a walk, seeking clarity amid the whirlwind of thoughts. In the park, the city's lights began to shine as the sun set. The fresh air seemed to invigorate him, but the restlessness still accompanied him. As he walked, he found Sarah sitting on a bench, a book in her hands. Upon seeing him, she smiled and called him over. Marcus approached and soon began to vent about his insecurities and the fear that consumed him regarding the presentation. He expressed his doubts, feeling a knot forming in his throat. Sarah listened attentively, and then with an understanding look told him that he didn't need to be perfect. What mattered was that he was authentic. She reminded him that everyone there was there to learn and support one another, and that he had already taken amazing steps up to that point. Trust in yourself, she encouraged. Her words penetrated deep into his heart. He realized he wasn't alone in that room. Everyone shared fears, failures, and yearnings. That was what made the experience so rich and valuable. He took a deep breath and, for the first time, felt that he could face that challenge with his head held high. The next morning, as he entered the classroom, the nervousness returned. Every gaze felt heavy, every whisper echoed in his mind. But when he looked at Sarah, who encouraged him with a gentle smile, a wave of courage enveloped him. He remembered his journey, how he had learned to embrace his weaknesses and open up to the world. With a deep breath, he decided he would no longer hide. When it was his turn, he stood up and positioned himself in front of the class. The words began to flow. He read a passage from his text that spoke of the internal struggle, the search for acceptance, and the power of vulnerability. Each word seemed to come alive, and as he spoke, he realized he was not just telling his story, but also connecting with others. At the end, looking at the faces of his classmates, he saw tears and smiles. They were not laughing. They were moved. When he finished, a reverent silence hung in the air before applause echoed in the room. Emotion overwhelmed him, and he felt a wave of relief and gratitude. He had done it. He had overcome his fear and shared his truth. After the presentation, the class approached him, congratulating him and sharing how his words resonated with their own experiences. Marcus felt welcomed and recognized. His friendship with Sarah deepened even further. And in that moment he realized that true wealth lay in the connections he had cultivated and the courage he had found within himself. The experience transformed him in ways he never imagined. He not only became a writer, but also a more authentic and vulnerable friend. Marcus understood that success was not just about being applauded, but about being true to himself and inspiring others to do the same. That day, Marcus not only freed himself from his insecurities, but also embraced the beauty of being human. With a light heart and an open mind, he was ready to continue his journey, knowing that each step brought him closer to his true essence. And so life became a story full of overcoming challenges, genuine friendships, and the wisdom that can only come from experience. After the presentation, Marcus still felt the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He could hardly believe he had managed to expose himself like that. Looking around, he saw his classmates approaching, each with a smile and words of support. The feeling of acceptance was new and invigorating. He never imagined that sharing his vulnerabilities could create such strong. "You were amazing, Marcus," said a classmate named Anna, her eyes shining. "Your words really touched my heart. I also struggle with these feelings." Marcus smiled, feeling warmth rise in his chest. He was not just relieved, he felt connected. Each of his classmates brought a story, a struggle, and there they were, all together in a safe and welcoming space. He realized that by sharing his own struggle, he had opened the door for others to do the same. While talking with his classmates, he spotted Sarah across the room. She was surrounded by other students, laughing and gesturing animatedly. Marcus remembered how she had been a pillar of support on his journey. He approached her, his heart light. "Thank you for everything, Sarah. Your words really made a difference," he said, gratitude shining in his voice. "You did all of this, Marcus. You just had to believe in yourself." "I'm so proud of you," Sarah replied, hugging him sincerely. Marcus realized that that moment of support was not just about him. It was about the community they had built together. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the classroom changed. Students began to open up a little more, sharing personal experiences during discussions. Marcus noticed how the conversations became deeper, as if the barriers that had once existed were being dismantled. He felt part of something bigger, a group where everyone could be authentic and vulnerable. One day, during a coffee break, a classmate, Lucas, approached Marcus. "Hey, would you mind reading a passage from my text? I'm a little nervous about the upcoming presentation." Marcus looked at Lucas, remembering his own fear before the presentation. "Sure, I would love to hear it. We're all in this together." He sat down next to Lucas, ready to offer support, just as Sarah had done for him. As Lucas read, Marcus realized that vulnerability was contagious. The courage he had found not only transformed him but also inspired others to open up. He saw how Lucas's words began to touch others. One by one, students started sharing their stories, creating an environment of empathy and understanding. During one of the classes, the teacher, noticing the change in the class's atmosphere, decided to start a discussion about the importance of vulnerability in writing. When you open up through your words, you not only free yourself but also touch the lives of others. Authenticity is key to art. Her words echoed in Marcus's mind. He remembered how he had felt sharing his own story and how it had changed his perspective. He raised his hand and shared his experience, explaining how the presentation had been a turning point for him. "I realized that by opening up, I not only faced my fears, but also created real connections. We all have our struggles, and when we share them, we can help each other." Marcus spoke, feeling a wave of emotion. At the end of the course, when the class said goodbye, the bonds that had been formed felt unbreakable. Marcus realized that he was not only carrying new writing skills with him, but also a new way of seeing himself and others. He had learned that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a powerful strength. Upon returning home, Marcus reflected on his journey. He had found courage amidst fear and had become a more authentic friend. Life was now a story of overcoming challenges, where every written word and every connection mattered. He took a deep breath, feeling lighter and stronger. The journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever came next, knowing he had himself and others to lean on. Marcus looked out the window of his home, observing the world outside with a fresh perspective. The journey he had taken transformed him in ways he never imagined. He remembered the first time he stepped on stage, trembling with fear, and how that moment became a turning point in his life. The adrenaline that once pulsed through his veins was now replaced by a sense of accomplishment and gratitude. He had learned that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but a bridge that connected him to others. The deep conversations that arose between him and his peers not only strengthened their bonds, but also created an environment of mutual support that everyone craved. Marcus realized that by sharing his struggles, he had encouraged others to do the same, and that had turned them into a true community. His transformation was not limited to the school environment. At home, he began to open up more with his family, sharing his fears and dreams. The conversations that were once superficial became deep and meaningful. He saw his parents become emotional as they listened to his stories and realized that they too had their own vulnerabilities. This exchange of experiences brought them closer together and strengthened their family ties. Over time, Marcus's confidence grew. He felt more comfortable expressing himself through writing, and his words began to flow. He started to write about his experiences, his struggles and his victories. What once felt like a burden now transformed into a form of art. He understood that true success was not just about material achievements, but about the ability to touch people's lives with his stories. However, not everything was perfect. One day, a classmate who had shown jealousy towards Marcus's progress began to spread malicious rumors about him. This situation could have been devastating, but Marcus, armed with the strength he had gained, chose to act differently. Instead of succumbing to anger or sadness, he chose empathy. He approached the classmate and tried to understand his motivations. This attitude not only diffused the situation, but also opened the door for an honest and transformative conversation. Marcus remembered the lessons he had learned throughout his journey. He didn't need to seek revenge, as true victory lay in transforming pain and negativity into understanding and empathy. This choice not only strengthened his character, but also inspired others to adopt a similar stance. At the end of the semester, Marcus had the opportunity to present a project on the importance of vulnerability and empathy in everyday life. He felt confident, and as he took the stage again, there was no fear, just a desire to share his truth with the world. As he told his story, he saw faces light up, and he knew he was making a difference. Upon leaving the stage, he felt at peace. It was not just about his personal victories, but about how he had helped others find themselves as well. The transformation that began with a simple act of courage now resonated in his life and in the lives of many around him. He took a deep breath, feeling light and strong. Marcus's journey was not just about overcoming challenges. It was a celebration of life, friendship, and human connection. He had learned that each of us has the power to transform our experiences into something beautiful and meaningful. Now he invites everyone to reflect on their own journeys. What stories do you have to share? What vulnerabilities can become your strength? Life is made of connections, and each of us has the capacity to impact others. Share your experiences in the comments and join this chain of support and empathy. Don't wait any longer. The time is now. Like and subscribe for more inspiring stories, because together we can make a difference.